Okay, everybody, I think we can get started with the last portion of our session, which we're calling our operational efficiency in action. So we've had 4 of our customers that were kind enough. This is probably too close. Am I too loud? I know I'm too loud in general without a microphone. I'm told all the time. So we've had 4 customers that have agreed to come up and share some stories with us. So it's going to be very open format. We've got a couple questions I'm just going to go through with each of our guests. We really do want to encourage questions. What we're thinking is we'll do kind of some questions towards the end just so we can ensure that we get through everybody's material. But everybody here is happy to take questions at the end, and then we'll be hanging around for a little bit. So if there's other dialogue and deeper conversations you want to have, we'll be here. What I think was really interesting with these folks, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just a second, is we're going to be touching on some technologies and some projects where all the technologies we talked about this morning, ISA 101, alarm management, change management, reporting, efficiency around engineering and modernization, each one of these gentlemen was able to kind of give us some real world examples of where they've actually deployed those strategies. So we thought it was really kind of impactful for an event like this to kind of get a voice of the user. So with that, I'm going to just ask the folks to maybe move the microphone down and introduce themselves. Robert, I'll start with yourself.
All right, so I'm Robert Poweska from Dofasco, just down the road, in the utilities business unit, and I'm a senior control systems analyst.
Mike Szabo, I'm from ArcelorMittal Dofasco as well, in the iron unit and controls automation and with an electrical background.
I'm Mark Presti. I'm one of the partners at NLS Engineering. I've got a lot of background in probably about 20 years in food and beverage, water, wastewater, and a lot of renewables.
I'm Sartip Kakaee. I work for Gerrie Foods. Gerrie Foods is a dairy industry. We do have 11 facilities in Ontario and Manitoba and Alberta. So I have a background of 26 years, mixed with the oil industry, from black oil to white milk. Thank you.
26 years. We were going to ask you how you maintained looking so good after 26 years. That it's kind of ruined me in this industry. But so actually, I'm going to start with asking Robert to share a couple of the stories that he has. I know, Robert, probably I think it was over the last 5 or 7 years, you've been involved in multiple modernization projects, systems upgrades, and each one of those, I think about 7 years ago, you started with the philosophy of the ISA 101, kind of a high-performance HMI strategy. Are you kind of able to share with us, why you chose that and how that worked out for you from an operations and engineering perspective?
Well, what we had and across utilities, I guess, is various systems, both Rockwell and other vendors, very colorful. And what really drove this was, in some areas, what we had is your basic, red and green, red stop, green run, and you go to another area, it was actually opposite, where red means run and green means stopped. So, like for somebody like me that just walked in there 9-10 years ago, it was just a disaster waiting to happen. The older guys knew it because it was just nailed in their head. When I go here, I know it's this way. When I go here, it's this way. And when I went in there, I'm like, oh no, this doesn't make sense. So we kind of started to think about it, and we got Gerrie involved. And we went with this grayscale ISA kind of standard where, if everything is fine, if everything is good in your process, you don't see too much color. Sure, there's a little bit of color, like information and stuff, but something is running, we made it white. When something is not running, it's kind of matches the background of it. So when the operator at 3 in the morning, when he's half asleep, looks at his screen and he sees nothing but like kind of gray, he knows there's nothing wrong in his process. And if there's something else, it pops up, red or purple, and I mean, it drives your eye to it.
So how did all the operators react to it? You did that across multiple business units, dealing with probably operators varying in ages and experience. What was kind of the reaction from your operators as a whole?
Well, Well, I'm sure my picture is still on a dartboard. The control room. You guys going this way. The experience of the senior operators didn't like it. I guess people sometimes have a problem adapting to change. So, I mean, somebody's worked on it for 20, 30 years. They're used to seeing stuff. The new guys liked it. They looked at it differently. I mean, we didn't do it to piss everybody off, but we did it to help them. We did piss a few people off in the process.
It wouldn't be a project if you didn't, right?
But yeah, it was all to help them, and they had so much more information, and the system was so much easier to maintain, even from our perspective, from the maintenance guys. Maintenance guys didn't have to call us to put something in bypass or go into the logic and bypass. They can just open up a pop-up and do it themselves. So, I mean, you take the good with the bad. I mean, it's not like we could go back. The guys that didn't like it, they got used to it. And the guys that did like it, they do offer feedback daily. Maybe we can move this, or maybe we can change it a little bit. Maybe, and being the system so flexible, it really takes no time to maintain it now.
So, in your opinion, would you do that again? Having to relive that, would you take the same approach?
Well, I've done it about 4 times, so there's really no going back now. But yeah, absolutely.
Good answer. Actually, so Robert, sticking with you for a few minutes, a couple other projects that you've taken on. I think you'd almost like a secondary project on an upgrade that you've worked on. You took on an alarm rationalization project. I think you had at least one system where there was maybe an abundance of alarms, not very efficient for the operator. So I think you took on a project to rationalize those. Can you kind of share that experience?
Yeah. So what we had on one of our systems. And for some people might be a lot, for some maybe not, but we have about 1,700 alarms in the system altogether, with anywhere between 100 and 150 alarms at any given time on the operator screen. What we found is a lot of times we did have an issue, and the operators wouldn't respond to it. They said, well, like, we didn't get the alarm. You look through the history, for the alarms, and sure, the alarm was there. It was just buried in those 150 alarms. And what we've also noticed is that a lot of the alarms, because the way they were set up, especially with the old system, they weren't as much as alarms, but they were a status display. So let's say the system would alarm if a pump is stopped, even though there was nothing wrong with it. It just showed the operator, pump stopped. Well, that's not an alarm. So we took all those alarms out of the system, all 1,700 of them, and we're still in the process of working with operation, basically going alarm by alarm. And whether we eliminate it, whether we make it smarter, a lot of times we change the logic right in the controller itself, so it doesn't generate the alarm. Condition-based alarming, so it only generates the alarm when a certain piece of equipment is running or whatever else happened in the process. So the goal is, I don't know, I'm hoping to go to probably about 10 active alarms at a time. I mean, it is a big system. There's about 42 PLCs in the system, so it will be difficult to eliminate every single one of them, but we're going to try and eliminate them as many of them as possible.
Excellent. So, Robert, last question for you. A lot of the systems that you guys have upgraded as a utilities team, you yourself and part of your team are actually engineering. You're doing the upgrades yourselves as your own internal integrator. As such, I think you early on in some of these you adopted the plant PAX standard and made use of the library that was talked about earlier today in one of the sessions. Can you kind of share with us what efficiencies that brought to you from an engineering perspective?
Okay. Well, using all the libraries, we can start with the PIDs. I mean, you have it right on your screen. You bring a pop-up, you can do all your PID tuning, change all your parameters, alarms, whatever, right from the block. I don't have to go into the logic to do it anymore. What else? Your regular pane display, for example. Maintenance would call us to put something in bypass for them, or force something on and off because they're going to be doing maintenance on it. Right now, they do have a separate login. They can do it themselves. They bring up a pop-up and They put the thing in maintenance mode and they can simulate whatever signal they want without us ever knowing. The other neat thing was using the permissive, the motor permissive block, where you have standard motor block and your motor won't start because your permissives is not met. Well, it gives you a link and another pop-ups comes on where it lists all your permissives. And it tells you exactly why it's not working. You don't have to go back in the logic and see, okay, my thing is not working, so now I have to look, okay, well, it's not working because this limit is not met. Well, I don't have to do it anymore. It shows them a list right on the HMI screen, which permissive, for example, is not met. They click on that permissive and it takes them right to the point on the PLC itself, or so they can see exactly what's wrong with it and how they can fix it. So just a few examples of how we made use of all these PlanPax objects.
Excellent. Thanks, Robert. Mike, I'm going to, I'll pick on Mike now. Mike, I know you've been involved in multiple modernization projects as well. And I think we've talked earlier through some specific sessions and earlier this morning, kind of the difference between migration and modernization. And Mike, I think you were recently doing an RSView 32, started off as a migration and kind of changed the thought pattern and took more of a modernization approach. Can you maybe share that experience?
Yeah, so I don't know if you want to call me lucky enough, but I'm part of both a modernization and a migration. I wasn't involved directly with the modernization, but where my department is, we have multiple facilities of the same type. And every so often they used to take them down for relines. Every 3 months they would take them down for like a month or whatever, where we'd have time to upgrade everything and really put time into it. They've took on a new philosophy now where we only have like a week down, where we can't do a full migration or a full modernization of everything. So now we're doing more of a migration. So we've gone with a migration from the RSView 32, and we migrated screens using the tools, and which they look great when they're first brought over. Everything's converted fine. Once you get into start trying to tweak them or adding more of the modern utilities, like all the stuff that Robert talked about, trying to utilize those as part of a migration, it's pretty near impossible, if not a ton of work. With our other facility that did modernize, they upgraded their PLCs and their HMIs and everything all at the same time. So when they were creating tags in the PLC and all that, it was set up so they could use modern faceplates and all that from the library. Where with the migration stuff was all built on a bunch of different equipment together, so tags weren't set up. That thought wasn't there when they first created all these PLCs and all these DCS systems. And so migrating, it's quite a headache. And like I said, you can't use the same modern faceplates and all that. So you have to try to make up your own for every unique situation. And when you're going through 150 screens that we have, you have to create a new faceplate for every pump or everything you have to click on. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, no, very good. Mike, I know that a lot of the systems in your area are relatively large. You're responsible for taking care of some fairly large systems. So years ago, I know you changed to a strategy where you started deploying thin client technology as opposed to physical computers out as workstations in the field. Can you tell us a little bit what led you to that and how that's what kind of efficiencies that's brought to you?
Yeah. Well, I was lucky in this case not to be part of the old PC-based operator stations. I came in as a virtualized station, but I've heard lots and lots of stories that when they used to have to upgrade, it would take days on days on days to go through and patch each PC that was in one of these workstations. And where we're at right now, we're at about 130 workstations in our area. So trying to go through and do patches on each one of these machines would take you weeks. And so now that we've gone to the ThinManager way, is we have a few virtual servers that we patch those, and that takes the same amount of time as one workstation, but then every single client that is now up to date. So we do, say, one server per facility. Now we have 30 thin clients that are all done at the same time. And just with the operator, when they have problems with, especially with ThinManager now, and I know it's gone through on some of the stuff they talked about before, but being able to look at what an operator's having issues with without actually having to go to the facility as well is a huge part of that, going with ThinManager too. They showed it this morning with their, and if the operator's having problems, you call them up, they're like, oh, this on this screen, and usually they can't describe it the best, but at least you can shadow it and see what they're seeing, and it's a lot easier.
Very good. Kind of on that ThinManager line, I know you guys, particularly in your area at Dofasco, have been using that for quite some time. I think you've kind of made some specific use out of some of the features like AppLink and some cool things that you were able to realize efficiencies on with the use of cameras. Are you able to kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, one of the ones I more recently did is we have a lot of SOPs for our operators, and part of that was the way the old SOPs were. They're just written instructions on everything, and they started getting into modernizing the SOPs themselves. And part of that was telling the operator of what screens to be on and what to push. So instead of us from the control side of it trying to go in there and take screenshots of everything, I actually set it up so that way whoever the operator was that was set on doing the SOPs that day had the option to capture the screen and then be using Paint and just paste it in Paint or for something simple and just save it from there. And the way we went about doing that was using the AppLink option. So we've been using AppLink for quite a while, where it stops the operator from being able to open any other application. So we have it load up with just our HMI application, and it stops them from being able to go, say, on the internet or anything else except for that application. And then also, there's an option in there to disable, part of the AppLink disables the Windows whole desktop and all that. What we were having issues with is that if a thin client would lock up in any sense, or the HMI client, the operator would think to press start and reset. And once we virtualized it, what that would do, it was actually reset the entire terminal server, which was running the entire facility. So every screen would go down, and they'd be pretty much blind at that point. So by implementing the AppLink, it stopped them from being able to interact with anything except for the HMI.
Very cool. Very cool.
And another actually situation where this ThinManager has really come into play for us. We have we call them scale cars, and what they are, there's two hoppers on it. They have weigh scales on them, and the operator has to drive this back and forth under some bins, fill it up, and then this gets dumped into other bins. What we have done, where the cab is on this scale car, is the operator can see the bins on one end and see whatever's on the tracks going on the one side, but the other side, where we have an HMI display that shows his weights in the hopper, it's very hard for them to see on the other side. So what we've actually installed is a camera that is on this car that is plugged into the USB of the Thin client, and so on his HMI display, like what we saw this morning on their screen there, there's a camera just at the bottom that they can see what's on the other side of that car. And the benefits of doing it through USB cameras is that if we lose our connection to the server for whatever reason, these cars are connected wirelessly, so if we lost that wireless network, because these cameras are connected directly into the Thin clients, the camera display actually stays up on the screen. Even though we've lost our HMI connection, the display for the camera stays up on the screen if they have to move that car out of the way or whatever they may have to do.
So I remember when you were first telling me that story, I asked you, what blew me away was when I asked you, so how long did it take you to implement that?
It took no time at all. It's actually one of the modules that are built right into ThinManager, along with the many other options for keyboard sharing, all that other stuff. And one of the options is a USB camera, and you can just select where it is. You can select it to resize different inputs. If you have an input into a PLC saying, when I'm traveling in a certain direction, make this full screen. When I'm not, drop it down to a smaller screen on there.
Very cool. Mike, you'd already alluded to one of the other things that I think your team did as you were moving to Thin clients years ago. I mean, your historical setup was very traditional, physical servers, physical clients out in the field, 130 of them. At the same time you were moving to Thin clients, I think you moved to, on the server side, you moved to virtualization. Can you kind of talk a little bit about how that setup works and what that's brought to you?
So in Dofasco, we were one of the first departments to start implementing the virtualization. So when we were going to ThinManager, we wanted a way to try to eliminate any of the hardware aspect of it as we could, because that's where the failures were coming from. And IT at the time was looking into the virtualization of servers. So we actually shared the cost on starting up the virtualization. So we have 2 locations that are redundant with each other, so they can fail over. Half of our servers are on one and half the servers on the other. And all the hardware is in those 2 locations at our main office in another location. And all our servers are, I think right now we're at about, I think 40 different servers, maybe a little bit more. For our HMI servers, we have file servers, we have EWS servers, that is basically just a location for Logix to connect to the PLCs. So anybody anywhere can just remote into these servers. And and as far as patching is concerned, we just patched that one machine, that one virtual server. And with patches, and with being so integrated with Rockwell, if we implement a Windows patch, that doesn't necessarily jive with Rockwell patches. Because of the virtualized setup, they actually take snapshots every night, which is set up through our IT department, not necessarily through us, but they take a snapshot every night. So what we can do is if we install patches, it's a lot easier where we just roll back and it's the exact setup we had the day before.
Yeah.
Instead of having to go through and undo patches or try to find out which patch it was, we can at that time just roll back and it's a lot shorter time frame.
Because undoing patches is always a fun thing. I do not miss those days. So I guess maybe just the last point on that, Mike, for you is, the setup that you had before going virtualized, as you described, is now kind of sitting in IT's domain, pun intended, right? Because that's physically, it's been like it used to reside physically with the OT controls team, who was responsible for everything around that. And I know people get emotionally attached to their equipment. How did the separation go from when the IT said, "Hey, we could take over this for you"?
Yeah, it was. They wanted to take over a little more than we wanted to give away, and still to this day we haven't given away fully. We still have a server machine, a backup we call it, that only handles like a very few number of clients at our facility, but. They wanted to fully take over everything, and we wanted to have a side of it where one of the inherent disadvantages to this is that we do need that connection, that network connection to them. But other than that, if anything happens to like RAM, hard drives, anything like that, barring something with the operating system, the software itself, they take care of it. They monitor it. We don't even really know that if something happens, because it's rated hard drives and the RAM is just divvied up, so it's completely taken care of by the IT department. We don't even honestly worry about it. We have it set up so for patch wise, they notify us of the patches and ship down to each server the patches they require. But for our process servers, we are the ones to initiate the install. But for, say, our EWS machines or anything like that, or our file servers where the Rockwell's not installed or any other software like that is installed, then they just go ahead and they actually do the patch installs where it's
Excellent.
not interrupting anything like that.
Very good. Excellent. I got to kind of witness that from afar, and it was really interesting to see, and it's worked out, I think, very well. Thank you, Mike. Mr. Presti, I'll now pick on you.
Sure.
So, Mark, thanks for joining us, and I know we'll maybe go back in your history. We've known each other for a long time, actually, multiple different facilities. You spent a good chunk of your career in the water wastewater business, and at one point you were a SCADA manager for the region of Niagara. So from an end user perspective, we can pick your brain on the history. I know. I think you kind of undertook some standards projects, like if we kind of switch topics and talk about standardization. You looked at what was going to be involved in developing standards from a SCADA and maybe a controls perspective. Can you kind of share what brought that on and how that unfolded for you?
Yeah, for sure. So probably about 15 years ago, it was in that window. I spent about 7 years with the Niagara region, as Gerrie's alluded to, SCADA engineer. And Niagara, as do many municipalities, first of all, actually, how many water, wastewater folks are in the house?
Good amount.
We got that in. All right, good, thanks. they do have a standard, and there was the red-green issue, as Robert alluded to. Like one side of the business is red running and green not, and the other side is the opposite, right? But it's well defined in that type of standard. So, well, what I'm going to be speaking to is about when I started my career with the region. I was relatively new there, given a bunch of drawings to review of some pump station upgrades that were happening over a segment of different several consulting firms, and so I reviewed the drawings, go to the next batch, review, make comments, go to the next batch, etc. And it was a cyclical thing. And anybody using water and wastewater kind of realizes that sewage pump station is a very fundamental engineering problem where water comes in and you got to pump it out before it overflows, right? So we were reinventing the wheel. So got my team together of techs and electricians, and understanding the dynamic of the business. That maintenance is a facet of an entire organization where people in operations actually own the licenses. We, the group, thought it was a good idea to put everybody together in a room and develop a sewage pump station standard. So it was a standard that was drawings, starting with control narrative, which operations would have their input on how they wanted their stations to run. Right? It wasn't an electrician station or a maintainer station. It was how because it was their licenses on the line. So we had put together a control narrative, a full set of drawings, PLC panel drawings, PLC code, HMI, everything that you could imagine, right? And it was a fantastic, and it was collaboration internally from all the different divisions within the region: maintenance, operations, engineering, I believe purchasing even sat in for one or two meetings, right? Which was fantastic. So everybody was on board. So now you had this standard, which we labeled as 85%, meaning that there's always 15% wiggle room for new improvements of technology. Every station is maybe a little different. And the interesting piece was, it was a full set of drawings and a full control narrative for the biggest station that the region had, and which I believe is maybe a 4 or 6 pump, right? But there's a lot of 2 pump stations, but the control architecture never changes, because when there's a problem, everybody knows it doesn't happen on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. It happens on a weekend or on a Friday night or in the middle of a storm, and the last thing you want to do is you want to open up a cabinet, find some prints, and figure out where everything's wired. So this standard was, everybody knew that card 1, pump 1, input 1 was always pump 1 run, right? As an example, to that level of detail. So it was really well. It was a great initiative put together by the region, and so then we rolled it out to consultants. And it took a little bit of adoption there, because we'd get some drawings back, and they'd, oh, this is a 2 pump station. Let's just cut half the IO, and we'd push back and say, no, this is what we need you to build. It needs to look identical everywhere. So it was a really good, and it's still in effect today, which is fantastic.
Excellent. Oh, very good.
Yeah.
Looking at the water industry specifically, and maybe turning our attention to data reporting. I think data collection and reporting is probably important to everybody in this room. What I find interesting, and I wanted to get your perspectives from a water perspective. It can be critical. The data that you're reporting can be critical. You're reporting some of this information to the Ministry of the Environment. And I know you've been involved in some very large systems, and then also some very small systems, maybe in rural areas. So the data that you need to collect and report is probably similar or identical, but one reporting and data collection system doesn't suit all. Can you kind of talk about how you look at the spectrum of the data reporting and collection?
Yeah, definitely. So this is both as NLS and as Niagara Region. But as you alluded to, everybody's bound by the same ministry guidelines for water quality. Doesn't matter if you're a small municipality in Northern Ontario with a very small population and a very low rate base, which can support a system, or you're a very large municipality that's got a very healthy system. They're all bound by the same MOE guidelines. So your reporting system really depends on the resources available. It's all about reporting the critical data, but how elaborate of a system do you need? So with respect to, and in some cases, We have some clients that are very small. Excel reporter is perfect because it just loads information once a day for them. They have a very small plant, and it's great. Within the Niagara region, we were going through exercises where every time, so there's 6 water plants and so many, maybe 40 associated remote stations, and I think 8 wastewater plants and 120 remote pumping stations. It's quite a large network. Every time the ministry would come in, there'd be a phone call that would come in to our area, and it was, well, we have a ministry audit. We need some data. We need SCADA data. We need SCADA data, right? And it was a full-time job at times for one of the staff, which was very taxing. And then, so we, again, as a group, we took a step back, saying this is kind of ridiculous. This is first of all data. It's information. Shouldn't have to rely on one person to get it. So we went through an evaluation process for different reporting packages, and we ended up implementing Vantage Point, which was great. So now I call this the Jason Oatley experience, right? And there's a reason for this, because we talk about Mike, you talk about relationships with IT and some of the struggles you had with IT, right? And which are great now, and we went through the same struggles, and so we had our IT host the Vantage Point server, which was great because we developed quite a large network of SCADA infrastructure, and they were supposed to mask the address of the server to everyone except our group. And so I don't know, it may have been a Friday afternoon, I can't remember, but I know I did call up my colleague Jason, and I said, Jason, can you do me a favor? And Jason was the manager of environmental services at the time. I said, can you just go to this address for me and see if it's live? And he did. And I'm like, don't touch anything, just leave it. And he's like, no, this is great. And he pulled up a trend, grabbed a few tags that he was wanting, like went to a pump station, grabbed some tags, exported it, all within a 5-minute conversation. And to me, it was amazing. It just solidified that the rollout was perfect, and everything we decided on was the right step, right? And so, because you're a little nervous at the time, and there's big rollout. What's the adoption going to be like? And it was literally at that moment, and I refer to that as that type of experience all the time, because that's exactly what happened, right?
So if the moral of the story is if even management can use the technology, it's got to be working.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, it was.
Is my manager still here? Did you leave?
It was good.
We'll edit that part out. Yeah, no, that's a great story. So, Mark, one other question for you now, kind of more from the NLS perspective, as part business owner, being one of the owners there, you probably look at standards, and a lot of what you do is engineering and programming. You have a complete staff that gets involved in these industries and does that. So, I think in your perspective around programming and HMI standards is the same but different. So, what does it mean to you as a business owner now? What kind of value do those standards bring to you?
It's tremendous value. The first question we ask the client is when they want to engage us for a project is, do you have any standards to follow? Right? If they don't, number one, before we put up our hand and say, well, we have one, we make it our business to know their business, first of all, right? Because we're not going to try and implement a 13 fragment tag standard in a business that doesn't need it, or they don't care to adopt it, or they can't maintain it. So one, we've over the years, because we've been doing this 20 plus years, right, between myself and our senior staff and partners individually, we've adopted a number of best practices for various industries, right? Because what's adopted well in the water industry may not be adopted too well in the food and beverage and manufacturing industry, right? What's adopted well in that industry may not be perfect for the energy side. So even from a panel design and build and commissioning perspective. So we are able to supply standards, but that is the first question we ask is as part of getting to know their business is what do they have for standards, and we apply them. Now from the other side, where they do have standards, and I go back to Niagara now because being on the team that was part of the implementation process, now I'm on the other side of the fence where we bid on projects and there is implementation to do in design and integration, and for us it's a very small scope, and it's a breath of fresh air because we know the client's going to get first of all what they need and what's developed, and it's nice to see it from this point of view because it works, right? When we go bid on a project, it's not hundreds and hundreds of engineering hours to sit and pick their brain and, well, how do you want this to work and how do you want this to operate and what, what's the layout? It's, yeah, they have a standard. It's very preliminary time involved to see if there's any major minor updates, and that's it, right? And it's a very easy part of the process. And that was the whole intent of developing those standards, because skate is a niche offering. Not every company does it. Not every, there's obviously a lot of people in this room do it, right? But very large consulting firms may carry a handful of staff that offer that, or build the relationships with companies like ours or other companies to do that offering, right? So if there's a standard in place, it actually makes it for an easier deliverable on the consulting end as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Kakaee, Sartip, I'll pick on you finally. I might come back and pick on any of you guys at any given time, by the way. But Sartip, let's take on the subject of change management. Several years ago, you took on a change management project and made some changes and implemented some technology. Can you kind of share with us, and that was specifically kind of around how your internal staff, as well as external partners, OEMs and integrators came in, worked on your system, made PLC changes, HMI changes. Can you kind of share with us what the process looked like prior to the change management, and then kind of what that journey was, where you got to now?
Sure, Gerrie. First of all, thanks for inviting me to share some of my experience with the folks here. As I mentioned, 10 years with Gerrie Foods. So Gerrie Foods at that time had 5 different plants, 2 in Toronto area, 1 in Guelph, 1 in Teeswater, 1 in Ivanhoe, which is Belleville area. So there wasn't any automation engineer on the engineering department. There were 3 engineers, project managers with the process or chemical background, chemical engineering background. So as Mark just mentioned, any project was implemented, basically the integrator or the OEM, whatever, they come to Gerrie Foods and they present their proposal to the project manager. Any standardization with the controls or the automation at all. Basically, the project manager doesn't have a clue about the controls or the automation side of it. So when I joined, it took me 6 months to 1 year to do a study on these 5 plants for Gerrie Foods in terms of support, in terms of controls, in terms of controllers, the PLCs. We had all kinds of PLCs, from Modicon to Siemens to Omron to Allen Bradley, Direct Logics, whatever, all these small PLCs in different plants and all of the places. And also the instrumentation, the controls. So my role actually, I wanted to do standardizations for the whole around the organizations, which supports the maintenance team. I'm sure we have some maintenance folks here. Instead of having different controllers, different PLCs, and probably you don't have a staff, internal staff, to be trained for all these different PLCs, you have to bring over from outside to support you. I mean, nothing to do with, nothing against the integrators or the support, we still need them. But as an end user, you need to decrease your costs, annual costs. So that was part of my role actually, to do some change in terms of the support, the controllers. So I did a 28 pages of standardization. Any projects comes with new to the Gerrie Foods in any plants, hand over I call it electrical automation controls standardization. So they go through all these, which I'm not trying to promote product against another product. Most of the products are good. I'm sure based on your applications and based on your plant or industrial, you have your own controller. So I did with the Allen Bradley controllers because I saw the integrators mostly in North America supporting Allen Bradley. So That was a huge change for Gailey Foods, that across the organization to do Allen Bradley with the new projects, with any change of an old equipments that you have different controllers on it, switch it to Allen Bradley. Some of the OEM actually, or some of the integrators, let's say a filling machines or a packaging machine from Europe, they say our standards is Omron or Siemens or Mitsubishi. And I force them, like sometimes there's a cost for doing that change. Maybe there's a $8,000 or $10,000 because their engineers, their programmers have been trained for that particular controller. So to do Allen Bradley or Rockwell stuff, they need someone to be trained, someone to support them. So I had, throughout these years, I had different approach to solve this problem, which I approached Gerrie Electric or even through Gerrie Electric Rockwell. I do have this problem. Now, I'm standardized with your product, but they're charging me for that up front. So I made that Rockwell to talk to their colleagues in Europe or in US to push the OEM to standardize with Allen Bradley without any cost for us. It worked out so far because Rockwell supporting that particular OEM from their engineering with no cost. That happened with 2 of my projects, which worked out. And not only Rockwell, actually ENH, Anderson Hauser. I did it just 2 years ago. We had a wastewater system from Netherlands, and their instruments, they were, I don't remember what controls they offered, but I wanted ENH, Anderson Hauser. And same thing, the false over here, ENH, I made them to contact Europe, and again, worked out fine without any extra cost to Gailey Foods. So that's that kind of change of management that now Gailey Foods, with automation, we make sure that we standardize with so many things in terms of automation, like controllers, controls or any other device that we're using in the plant.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. So a big part of what you were talking about there is, you know, as a company, you know, in the dairy industry, you rely on OEMs from all over the world, and integrators, maybe local, somewhat remote. So you've got people all over the globe that you rely on for support. Can you share with us, do you allow remote access? Was that always the case? How do you work that with the support from the support perspective?
That was another part of my role actually that I brought the first time to Gailey Foods, remote access with VPN. So again, as I said, from my that 6 months to 10 or 1 year study, I found out different OEMs from US, from Europe, from local, let's say Ontario or even Quebec, process OEMs or integrators to packaging, to from filler and packaging lines, robots. So for any small issues at that time, I'm talking about 10 years ago, exactly 2009, 2010, they had to fly the folks from Germany, from LA or from California or from Florida to our plants, pay for the flights, pay for all the days that they're gonna come over here for small modification that we needed to do it in the line, or for any troubleshooting. Sometimes the 3 days is gonna go down because you wanna bring someone from Germany over here to Toronto. I did although we had that time some of the equipment, we had I don't know if some of you now, you remember the dial-on modem?
Yeah.
So we had some issues actually, that was before my time, and I heard stories that someone from Montreal, a process integrator, that dialed into our process with some problems or modifications in the line. So during the download, the line went down, so PLC stayed with fault. Now you have to fly him down all the way to Toronto. And that's happened. So I moved all these dial-on modems, so I put the Ethernet, remote access, VPN, and now I made, you're trying to solve a problem, but you bring up another concerns.
Yeah.
So that's always like that. You think that you're going to solve a problem, but no, there are more concerns are coming, more issues, or I should not call it an issues, but concerns. Security nowadays, everybody talks about security. So I put the VPN access to all 5 plants, and so the OEM using his laptop to support. We just made through our IT department a port to access the plant. Now he's using his laptop, downloading whatever modification, troubleshooting, but we didn't have the latest file with us, right? So in this case, we had a problem with one of the big OEM, and actually that didn't happen remotely, it happened in the plant. So they have different technicians across North America. You want to do a modification, they send a technician. We had one of the plant that in Toronto, it's a 24/7 hours plant that is always running. And we had a modification in the process pasteurization. And the guy came 3 days he spent to do the modification. He did everything, commissioning, everything went fine. The area in Toronto is kind of, we have a problem with the power glitch, power surge or sag because of the rains and storms. So we had a power sag over power surge or power sag. The PLC went fault. And then now we had to call the technician from this integrator, it's an international integrator. They sent another one. So it was only 2 months from that modification. And this guy came, whatever he has a program, he downloaded in the PLC, and we was trying to start it up, everything going crazy because we did some physical change in the, so this guy cannot figure it out what's going on. Yeah. And he spent the whole 2 days, actually. We were down 2 days. Wow. And then he called his colleague who was the last time was here. Oh yeah, it's still in my laptop. I didn't update it on the server. Their organization server. They have to update it. So anybody comes to do a service in any plant, they should upload it from there. So that was the issue. Between 2 technicians, they had different programs. So now I had to fight for not paying the integrator for 2 days, and also the cost that the plant was down for 2 days. So I had to do first I made a gateway PC, we called it, a gateway PC. Each plant has a gateway PC that I installed, Allen Bradley software, whatever software, the HMIs, everything. I have it on that gateway PC. So that became my central gateway into the whole plant. And any OEM comes, he can do his programming or his modification, troubleshooting from there, or even any remote access, like Jamie and Amy. Jamie and Amy, they talked about it this morning. That if you are on vacation, if you have an internal programmer or technician that from the plant, he's on vacation, he can support you from his iPhone or from his laptop without having his software on. So we have all the softwares on the gateway PC. You can sit down on vacation, or you are in a business trip in the US, you can go to the lobby and ask for a computer, you can support that. So I was able to do that. But still, again, another concern came, which is that gateway is open to different integrators, from process to packaging. So how to control these guys, how to make their access securely accessing this PC or gateway PC. The concern was to make sure that these guys, they go into their equipments only. So the solution came with the Asset Center. So Factory Talk Asset Center 2 years ago, I implemented that to limit every single OEM into their machine. And that's working out perfectly. Now we have one central, let's say a PC that has all the latest program, and you know who's accessing it, who's doing any change, any modification. In fact, actually this morning I was attending the Asset Center session, that I asked the question that I can put different files which with extension with the AutoCAD, let's say. We have a PNID for the plant. Because we have different engineers working in different projects, everyone does his own projects and he updates his own PNID, and there's so many copies in different areas. So now I can put the PNID, the latest PNID, put it on the Factory Talk Asset Center as a new asset, and if you want to work on that, you can pull it out, do your modification, check it in again, so now you know you have your latest PNID. So Factory Talk Assets is really a great tool that I am using it for the last 2 years, and it's been doing very well. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you.
I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Of course you did. What was my question again? No, sorry. You did a fantastic job. And I really like that story because that was something that's evolved over several years. And it started small, right? With just monitoring some changes, putting in some basic technology, solving one problem, maybe I created another, and then address those, but kind of saw incremental value with each step. So I think that's fantastic. Just one more question, and then maybe we can open it up to the audience if anybody wants to ask questions, is we'll switch gears to ThinManager. Mike talked a lot about ThinManager. He's been utilizing that for years. You're just about becoming a new user. You're in the middle of deploying one right now. One of the unique things, I think, one of the key reasons you went that route was for some mobility. Can you kind of talk about what your plans are for ThinManager with the mobility in the new facility?
So ThinManager, I've been knowing about ThinManager for the last 5-6 years, I believe. When did ThinManager went to Rockwell? Before that time, ACP. Where's Jamie?
Oh, Jamie had to leave.
Oh, okay.
He's still with Rockwell.
No.
He did a great job this morning.
I knew about it, but what I'm trying to say...
I think Rockwell acquired ACP 3 or 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Yeah. So before that, I knew about it.
It was in 2016 in Atlanta when we were down.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah. So it's 4 years ago, something like that, 3-4 years ago. But anyways, I always wanted to implement it because it's a great tool for our applications and our industry type. But I couldn't find out the ROI because any change you want to do, any money you want to spend, your financial department, they look for the ROI. Okay, if the plant is running and doing that much product for me, I'm getting my money. Why I spend another 10,000 or another 20,000? So there's always my challenge, or I couldn't make the business case for implementing ThinManager. So I was always waiting for a kind of a big project from doing from scratch. That's the best way to go. And so we have this project in Teeswater, and Teeswater is a powder plant. We do powder milk from that plant. So we do have different stages of floor, actually 4 different floors for the plant, because the dryers and the evaporators and different stages. So the operator we have a control room on the first floor. So the operator has to travel. Actually, we have 2 operators has to travel up and down because of the testing and testing required for the process. So the OEM, which is GEA, GEA, they propose the different HMIs in different floors and control rooms. So altogether, 7 stations. Am I right, Sean? Because Sean is working with me. 7? Do you remember how many Thin clients we have? Oh, you don't remember? Yeah, but no, I'm going to talk about that later on. So I think it's 7 different stations. Gerrie Electric actually working with me in implementing this ThinManager. And the network that we put together in the process, for the building. Because the OEM came with their requirements, and they said we are not involved with the network. So thanks to Gerrie Electric with Sean, I've been working with him for the last year maybe. We put together the network, the PLC network, the server, the IDC, Industrial Data Center. That's the first time that I'm installing IDC for Gerrie Food. It's a great tool. Thanks to Steve and Steve actually he gave us a chance to see his plant actually, and that's what he made me like. It gave me an idea that IDC is really we should implement it. So we implemented the IDC with the help with Sean. We made a PLC network now. All the process they talk to each other, and we implemented ThinManager so that we have Thin Client, and also. As I mentioned, we have different floor. So I thought about why should I have an HMI in each different floor. So I suggested to the integrator, instead of getting me an industrial computer or monitor, I need an iPad, because the way of that our process, the operators, they have to do some test, open a valve, close a valve, or see some physically some process area. So you go with your iPad. Actually, you can go and operate your valve and close or open, and physically you can see it. So you don't have to have two guys, one in the control room with his radio. Valve is open. Check on that. Yeah, it's open. Oh, okay, close it. So you don't have to do that anymore. So you go, even if you have one operator, the other one in lunchtime, you can go up to the first floor, second floor, whatever, and check on that. So we haven't implemented the iPad yet because it's in the commissioning process. We have commissioned half of the process, but the iPad, we haven't done it because we need the IT department to install the Wi-Fi modem across the building. So. Yeah, that was a great.
So we're going to all have to get together again next year to hear how this worked out, right?
Sure.
Yeah. That's where we going. That's right. Apparently, we have to do it a little later in May because it's still not good weather here. I don't know what's going on. So, guys, thank you very much. Those were some fantastic stories. Really appreciate it. That was fantastic. We're happy to open it up to questions. Does anybody have any questions they'd like us to field right now?
Okay, I got the mic. I think the first guy was Robert, right?
Robert.
Yeah, Robert. I just had a question with regard to the implementation of plant packs at your facility. What was the total amount of time spent doing the design work, like approximately, and the amount of time spent commissioning? And did you also bring in outside resources, or was it done internally?
Actually, our original plan was to farm the entire project out, including the engineering, setup, commissioning. But then, as we started looking at it, we've decided that, okay, if we're going to farm this out, we're going to basically get more or less the same thing what we have right now. We wanted to improve on it. So we've decided to do this in-house. So if we're going to be replacing the entire HMI system, putting all the effort into it, we might as well make it better. So we went through all the PLC programs, we've changed the logic, we've added blocks to make everything smarter. So we really customized it to, so it wasn't a total rip and replace, we basically redone the entire system. We did have Gerrie Electric come in and set up the infrastructure for us. So set up all the servers, set up all the software, and then we kind of took over from there and did all the engineering commissioning.
So you did the real-time Sorry. So does that mean you did the implementation while you were running the process, or was it done during a shutdown?
We're lucky enough that we were the last project that we're almost done is we basically did it in a shadow mode, so the old HMI system was still running. So basically, the guys have the old HMI and the new HMI right beside it. So we're slowly migrating over. It takes time because we went from an old RSView 32 to plant packs, and most of our controllers, we have 42 of them. We had to flush every single one of them to at least version 20. So that took time because we could only shut down certain processes at a certain time. The last two PLCs we're actually doing next week. And hopefully, once we do those two, then we'll be all moved over to, but yeah, it took time and scheduling and logistics to get it all upgraded.
Good for you, that's awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, I have a question. Is it Mike? Yes. Yeah. You said you handed things over to IT. So what happens with the upgrades to the software? Do they do that for your Ars Logix 5000, or do you guys handle that?
Yeah, no, our EWS, our engineering workstation, virtual servers, we handle everything on those. So what they do is they pushed forward the patches, the Windows patches that they consider that we need to install in these. And right now they have us sitting at like a 3-month window. We need to upgrade or patch within that 3 months. But that's all they do. They don't touch the servers at all. Excuse me. And all our software, we install the software ourselves on it. It's basically like a desktop in your office, but it's virtualized and it can be accessed by anybody, anywhere, which is great for our maintenance teams, our electricians and all that. So if they ever have to troubleshoot and get on this, they know for a fact that if they log into that machine, it's the most up-to-date software, everything's there for them to see.
Is Windows 7?
Yeah, it's Server 2012 is what we're using. Windows Server 2012 is what we're using. Yeah, that's what we're using. Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Steve, you got a question?
What's the one keyword from Atlanta?
We're not going there. We're not having that question. Those questions are taken offline. What happens in Atlanta stays in Atlanta. That was the rule when we went on that trip.
I told you don't be shy, but not that
Very good.
Question for
Yeah.
Sartip.
Yeah. Bring this over.
So you said you implemented Asset Center,
Yes.
and the integrators are logging in remotely from Asset Center clients?
Yes, yeah. So I do have, again, with the help of Sean, I installed a server for the Factory Talk Asset Center, and I had another server, actually one server for both of them. Then we did a partition, right, Sean? Help me if I make some wrong. I had to install or create 2 engineering stations. I had one before. Now that was another concern which I forgot to talk about it. So each plant had one engineering station with one software of Allen Bradley or HMI, whatever, RS Logics. And one incident happened in that particular plant in Toronto, 100 Clayson Road. We had one packaging integrator working remotely from Minneapolis logged into our engineering station and doing some troubleshooting on the packaging line. At the same time, we had a problem with the process area, which our integrator from Montreal needed to log in, and he couldn't do nothing. So we had to wait, and I had to call this guy from Minneapolis. Can you give me just 1 hour? And I had to interrupt him, and he was unhappy, actually. Really, he was kind of upset. Interrupt him, and then let another guy to log in and do his job. So that made me to think about 2 engineering stations. So we did it, virtualized the engineering station with 2 different software, and we let the OEM or integrator to log in through the Factory Talk asset.
Yeah, so Asset Center basically, so client is in your 2 workstations, or clients are there at their...
No, they don't have. It's
Okay.
so that's why my policy, I don't allow integrator to use their laptops in my facilities at all. The only way I allow them, right now I'm implementing it with Factory Talk asset with one of the plants right now we have. If we have a big modification, just happened just last week through the long weekend. So the integrator comes and they do have another panel to add into the process area with another controller, a remote I/O controller to the same PLC. Now he has to do a lot of modification. He's not going to sit on my engineering station to do these modifications. So checks out the program from the Factory Talk asset, take a copy to his laptop, do whatever he wants to do, and he's going to do commissioning everything. And then when he finalizes the program, he checks it in with the last version. Very simple, very easy. So you just give him a limit. If you attended the Factory Talk Asset seminar, or if you want to ask them, there's a lot of features on the Factory Talk Asset Center that you can give a limits. what percentage of access you want to give to your OEM. So some of them I trust them. They've been in the plant for the last 7-8 years. So kind of I give them even the design access, which they can change the programs. It depends on the trust that you're building it with your integrators. Yeah. So yeah, that's how they do it, remotely, or they have to do it through our engineering station. That's the beauty about it, that I had the problem before I do have this factory talk asset. I have a programmer in with like our engineering team. So sometimes he does a small modification. We don't have to call the integrator. So he does his own change. He keeps the latest program in his laptop or somewhere else, or a copy on the desktop, whatever. And the integrator comes, does his own change. So that's why I had to centralize the files for all the controllers in Factory Talk Asset Center. That's the best way, secure, and you know what modification has been done on that particular PLC. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Excellent. Any other questions?
I just got a question for Mark from NLS. Since no one's been picking on you yet, I figure I'll have a quick one for you.
Sure.
I was just wondering, you had mentioned how there's a large number of nodes on the network, like with all the pumping stations and with the wastewater treatment plants and the drinking water plants and whatnot. What sort of communication infrastructure did you set up to be able to get all the nodes connected, and how did you centralize all the data from those nodes?
Yeah, a good question. So the plants were all connected via fiber through, I think it's Niagara Region Broadband that owns the fiber, so all the municipal buildings within the region are tied that way. That's managed through the IT infrastructure. Each of the plants out to the remote sites 15 years ago was primarily lease lines, right, which were very problematic and expensive, seeing as there was just a high volume of lease lines that were active and inactive. So then there was a migration away from that to owned free wave, like 900 megahertz infrastructure, and now there's a migration away from that to actually just cellular technology, just because it's the costs come way down, flexibility, and so I know the region's been really making that shift. Yeah. So essentially, it's all the remote sites that are owned to that plant from a process flow point of view are connected to the plants. The plants are all tied via fiber, and then the plants are all tied together via top-end terminal server that can view everything through a Citrix interface through IT. Yeah.
And it all concentrates to one central server?
No, that's going back to this IT relationship. So traditionally, it was all desktop servers or desktop computers in all the plants. Then we moved to server infrastructure, and we're building a relationship with IT at that time, and a request saying, well, we don't deploy servers in the plants. Is there an issue if we host all the servers in IT for all the plants? And that's that wasn't going to happen, right? I don't think anybody in this room would be okay with that. So there's server grade computers in each of the plants, primary, secondary, et cetera, plus historians, and then they centralize to a top end central server for data collection or shared data and whatnot, so everybody can see as they need to.
So it's centralized just for reporting purposes, not collection?
Correct. There's individual historians at each plant, and then they centralize to a central historian for reporting purposes. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, guys. Greatly appreciate it. Another round of applause. Some of us will be kind of hanging around, so please feel free to pull us aside, ask questions.